I know self-publishing's not for everyone. Nothing is. But if you've considered self-publishing for even a minute, listen up, because I'm betting I know what's holding you back from exploring it further or getting started. Number one, you think the self-publishing process is a lot harder than it actually is. And number two, you're understandably afraid of doing it, air quote, wrong. So I've created a new free resource for you. It's called the Self-Publishing Starter Kit, and you can get instant access to it by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101. In this free training, you'll discover the exact 4 steps to focus on and mistakes to avoid so you can publish an incredible book that's indistinguishable in quality from a New York Times bestseller without overthinking, overguessing, or overspending in areas that won't make a difference. Again, visit publishaprofitablebook.com/self-publishing 101 to get instant access. Welcome to the Write the Damn Book Already podcast. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 6-time author and book editor, and I help people write and publish powerful, thought-provoking, wildly entertaining books without any more overthinking, second-guessing, or overwhelm than absolutely necessary. Because let's face it, some overthinking, second-guessing, and overwhelm is going to come with the territory if you're anything like me. I believe that story and shared perspective are 2 of the most potent ways we connect with one another, and that your story, perspective, and insights are destined to become someone else's favorite resource or pastime. For more book writing and publishing tips and solutions, and plenty of free and low-cost resources, visit publishaprofitablebook.com. And for recommendations of fabulous books you've possibly never heard of, book writing inspiration, and the occasional meme so relatable you'll wonder if it was created with you in mind, follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth Lyons Author. You know, just when I think I have come up with the perfect, most logical and justifiable reason why I can't write on any given day, week, whatever, I meet someone who blows that to smithereens. And this week, that was Elle Evans. Elle is the author of the novel Wedding Issues, where competition for a bridal magazine cover unleashes mayhem, forcing a mastermind maid of honor to stop being a people pleaser and figure out what she wants out of life in this hilarious, frothy debut. I obviously did not write that. I am reading it from the press release. But because I'm incapable of going an episode without mentioning Neely Tubati-Alexander, I will read her blurb for the book, which is so good. I actually read the blurb, to be clear, without realizing it was Neely at first. And then I saw it was Neely and I was like, oh yeah, duh. But it's so good, it made me want to read the book, which is great because now I have it here. But as Neely said, Bride Wars meets high society haughtiness in this laugh-out-loud, feel-good story of how far we are willing to go for love and friendship. Elle Evans' voice sings. It's sharp, witty, and full of flair. I am a fan. Well, if Neely is a fan, then I am a fan. The thing about Elle, it's like the thing about Mary or a thing, I don't know, that's a different title. Anyway, the thing about Elle is that she's an anesthesiologist, people. So when I hear stuff like that I think, okay, my little excuse of, oh my gosh, I have to go run the car through the car wash because I barreled through 30 inches of snow, and I did 4 days ago to get out of Flagstaff. It was like the storm of the century. It was really fun. I was in it with my bestie, Erin Thorburn. We were up there trying to write. It went sort of well. The excuse that I need to get that car through the car wash to get the salt off, all of a sudden has very little weight. Because here's Elle, which is not her government name, and you'll hear more about that and why within the episode, is writing a book on her notes app in the operating room between procedures, whilst keeping a patient alive, albeit unconscious. This was such a fun conversation about science and art and blending it together and balancing it all. A Boston native, Elle spent 5 years in Nashville, soaking up sweet Southern hospitality and even sweeter iced tea. She now lives in Philadelphia with her husband and rescue dog Calypso, the first of many pets named for Greek mythology characters. In her spare time, when she's not anesthetizing people or writing books, she enjoys hiking, rock climbing, and attempting ambitious cocktail recipes. I mean, this was so fun. Let's just get to it. Most authors have another job. Like for most of us, this isn't their full-time job. And you're an anesthesiologist.
Yes.
I didn't even, when I first read that, I had so many thoughts. And hence I have so many questions.
I'm ready.
All right. My first question is, what takes you, I'm so fascinated with people who have a science background, like are scientists, but then also have this creative side.
Mm-hmm.
So I spoke several episodes ago to Anne Garvin, who's a novelist, and she has a PhD in, I think, I want to say exercise physiology or something. I'm sorry, Anne, I'm probably royally screwing that up. But I had talked to her about the same thing. So what made you want to write a book, and fiction at that?
Yeah, well, I think honestly, my interest in writing and fiction in general definitely predated my desire to be a doctor. I've been reading and writing since I was a kid, like really small. I used to write these books when I was in elementary school, and my parents would take them to Kinko's and get 5 copies made. And so I'd
You're
publish
kidding.
which is so cute and so supportive. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But I was one of those kids that was just sort of naturally like really excited about school and interested in school. I liked science. And I sort of understood that writing as a career was definitely a lot less predictable and sort of safe. And my parents, I think, were sort of encouraging me to continue this sort of, you're good at school, let's keep going on the school path. And so I sort of continued to stumble into medicine. I was just one of those kids that was good at science. And so I didn't really know that many jobs except doctor. So I just kept going through. And when I got to college, I was like, I'll take pre-med classes, just see where it goes. I became an EMT and then just kind of kept going towards medicine. And now I'm here. But I really enjoy getting to use what feels at times like 2 totally different parts of my brain, a very analytical, scientific side at work, and then getting to come home and just sort of create these new characters and conversations and scenes. So actually, my first ever quote book in family lore was when I was 4 years old on a stack of Post-its, and it was called The Dog Who Ate Cat Food and the Cat Who Ate Dog Food. And that's essentially the whole plot right there in the title. So I got a little better at sort of, creating some intrigue along the way. But yeah, I've sort of always been a writer. In school, I wrote my classes like Christmas skits and things like that. That was sort of always my go-to.
That's amazing. That is so cool. Okay. So then at what point, like as an adult, did you think, I think I want to write a novel?
Yeah. So I had, like in high school and early college, I had sort of tried writing books just for fun, and I would just sort of do it. And I would be like, oh, I'm going to go to a coffee shop and write with a capital W now. And I would like write a couple thousand words of different books and never get anywhere. And in college, I wrote plays, which I switched to for a bit. That was fun. I got some done in like small festivals around Massachusetts. And then a couple years into medical school, I was like, all right, it's time. I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to learn something about how to write a book. And I'm actually going to take a lot of how I succeeded in medicine and apply it to writing, which some writers just kind of have their artistic muse and inspiration comes out. It's not me. I need goals. I need.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Okay.
So I had a Google sheet with like words per week that I needed to do. And I was researching querying and agents and like all of the underside of publishing. And I think just sort of taking all of the skills that I had learned from how to succeed in medicine and sort of applying that same overachiever mindset to writing, and then sort of from there.
Okay. That's fascinating, because I think for so many people, the question is like, when do I fit in the writing? And so I love to talk to people who have truly the most defensible, is that a word? I mean, it's early. I think that's a word. Yeah. Like justifiable reason for not having time. So some people are like, yeah, I have 12 kids. Okay. You have a justifiable reason. But when you are a practicing physician, so how did you fit that in?
Yeah. It's hard. Like I said, when I used to dabble in writing, I would do it as I would have my little moleskin journal and I would go to coffee shops and I would it would be this like hobby thing that I did. And then when I decided to try and take it seriously, I was like, all right, you just have to come at it from the mindset of the writing is going to happen. And it's just there. We're going to force it into my schedule, no matter what that looks like. And so for me in the hospital, what that has morphed into recently is I actually do a lot of my first draft writing on the notes app on my phone. So I am like in the OR and I have downtime. We're waiting for the surgeon to finish a different case or something. So I'm just sitting there on my phone and I'll just write in the notes app.
This is a plot right here. Like this is a character, right? Like writing a book on her notes app in the corner of the OR. I love it.
Yeah. And part of what comes with that is I also at the same time embraced the mindset of just garbage first drafts, because as you can imagine, if you're writing the sentences at a time in the notes app and you don't have access to the full manuscript, I'm like, did I actually write that scene that I thought about writing, 2 chapters ago, or did I just imagine it? I don't know. So I'm just going to pretend like I did and then write from there. So, it definitely enables me to write quickly. The quality suffers, but that's fine because I've always kind of done more of my quality in the revising sort of second and third stage anyway.
So how do you get it from Notes app to something else? What do you use
So my favorite is I use Scrivener. Yeah. Okay. So if Scrivener had an iPhone app, I would be publishing like 10 books a year.
I can't believe they don't.
I know. But the crosses we have to bear. So
right.
In the meantime, I write in the notes app on my phone. And then when I get to my computer, because the notes do cross over from my laptop to my phone, which is key. So then I'll just copy and paste however I wrote into Scrivener and go from there.
Do you ever dictate into notes?
No, I have not. I think I need to see the sentences as I'm writing. When I'm driving or things, I call it writing in my head, but I am picturing the scenes that will happen. Sometimes I'll speak out loud the dialogue, which I probably look crazy if anyone pulls up next to me at a stoplight. But if I intensely sort of pre-imagine the scene, then when I finally sit down to actually write, it just comes a lot quicker than if I'm staring there being like, all right, now let me think about
what are they going to say? I do the same thing with whether it's dialogue or just thoughts that I'm having while I'm in my car. And my new thing is I just convince myself that nobody knows that I'm not having a phone call on Bluetooth.
That's true.
Right?
You could be on speakerphone. It's
exactly.
You can be gesturing. It looks totally normal.
Sometimes I start gesturing with my hands just so that it looks more. Sometimes I try to make myself look really intense. So it looks like I'm having a phone call. Right? So no one calls 911 and is like, there's this insane woman next to me. Pen name. So this is pretty cool to me. People wonder about doing a pen name a lot, typically with memoir, for a lot of understandable reasons. Sure. And so when I was reading about you and that you chose a pen name for this, because you also have medical publications written under your given name, and you didn't want people to be finding them together and be confused. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like if you know that someone's an anesthesiologist and you're looking for a medical-based paper, and then you come upon a novel about a wedding, you may be confused and think, are these the same people? How does that work for you day to day with people knowing you as an author as Elle and people knowing you as a physician by something else? How do you manage that?
Yeah. So I kind of went back and forth when I was first deciding, what to publish under. And I think for me, it's both sort of the academic papers that I publish under my legal name, but also just, patients like to Google their doctors. They want to see your credentials. They want to see your education. They want to think of you as this very educated and trustworthy and competent person. Yeah. And I do not at all think that writing a novel about weddings takes away from that. But, there's also, I want to make sure that my patients feel as comfortable as possible. And so when they Google me, if they want to look me up, I want to make sure they can find what they're looking for. And at the same token, people who are interested in my books, I want them to not have to read boring things about value-based care. I want them to find other hopeful future books that I write. And so day to day, my first name starts with the letter L, and I wanted my husband to call me Elle, like the letter, as a nickname. And he was like, no, that's silly. I'm not going to do that. And so I was like, all right, this is my time. I can be called Elle. And now you have to call me this sometimes.
That's so cute. I love that.
Origin. That's just me being petty.
I love it.
But I think just in sort of book world, people call me Elle. In my mind, I hear it as the initial L. So it feels natural to me to it. And I honestly, it's kind of fun because it already feels like two separate worlds. And so I feel like it's like my Hannah Montana life where I went to New York for like Zibby's book event 2 weeks ago, and I was Elle for 2 days, and it was so fun. Books. And then I had a call shift on Sunday and I came back, and I was a doctor again, but yeah.
It's like Beyonce and Sasha Fierce. It's given me a good idea because I'm thinking, okay, like I could have another not another personality, but her identity.
Yeah.
Like, what would I like that to be? What would I like people to call me for a couple of days? That could be fun.
Yeah. You get to choose what people are going to call you, which you don't get to choose very often. So
I know. Sometimes if I go to Starbucks, do you ever give them, I'm outing myself and my insanity here, but sometimes I'll give them a different name.
Oh, I have not. I want to try that now. I just look at them, and just say something absurd. Just like, I'm going to look at them and say, my name is also Beyonce. Like, please, on the cup.
I never even thought of that. But now I'm going to do that. Did you ever see the Friends episode when Phoebe realizes she can change her name to anything she wants? And she goes,
that sounds like a good one though.
Yeah, well, she gets married and she goes to change her last name. And when she goes, she's like, what should I do, this or this? And the guy says, you can do whatever you want. And all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and she's like, really? So she makes her name Princess Consuela Banana Hammock.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So now you've given me this other idea of going into a coffee shop and like not Anne or Carol, but like you said, Princess Consuela.
Yeah, just say it with a straight face. Don't break eye contact and write it on the cup. Write it on the damn cup.
Don't break eye contact. That's the best part. Right, exactly. Okay, so your publishing journey. Can you tell me and us a little bit about that?
Yes, buckle up for a lot of rejection along the way, which I don't think is an uncommon experience. So I'll just normalize that up front. So I started, like I said, trying to take publishing seriously several years ago when I was in medical school. And I worked on a novel for about a year or so, went through the whole process, had a bunch of beta readers, et cetera, workshopped it a bunch, and then started querying. It took me about 8 months to get an agent. Had a good amount of full requests. I don't know if people listening are in that process themselves. That's when the agent sort of expressed some interest and they're going to read more of your work. And then I actually had a couple of offers at the end, which was exciting, but it just took a while. I sent out my batch of queries and was like, I'm going to have an agent next month. Narrator. That did not happen. It took a while, but ended up with an agent I really, really like, who really sort of understands my work and definitely makes it better. And then Wedding Issues was unfortunately not that first book that I wrote. So actually it was the third one. So the first, the first, it's so sad. The first two that I wrote, unfortunately, did not find homes on submission. And it doesn't mean hopefully that they're dead forever, just back to them, hopefully, and revise them. Because definitely with every book that I write, I can tell how much stronger of a writer I'm getting, both at the sentence level, but also just overarching plot, character development, all of it. Really, it's actually tremendous, the progress that I've made only in a couple of years. I will say I had absolutely no formal writing training when I started or at any time. So I think probably for me personally, I was starting a little bit lower just in terms of my understanding of story arcs and character development. I was just sort of like, this sentence sounds good and this is a fun thing to read about. And I didn't really have a good grasp on the kind of core beats of a story. Sure. They say in like artistry that, like for Picasso or et cetera, you need to understand the normal rules before you can break them. And so I think due to my lack of experience, I took no writing classes ever. It just took me a little bit longer to really understand those rules. And so I think I evolved a lot in the first couple of books. So third book, actually, when I finished the manuscript the first time, the last line of the book I wrote as like a joke to myself was "third time's the charm." And then
that's cute.
Great. So I manifested it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So that one went to Zibby Books. Mm-hmm. And then how long was the process between because it comes out in April, right? So how long was the process between acceptance and then release?
Yeah. So everything in publishing, if you're trying to break in, it just moves glacially, just
Glacially.
than you think. So we sold wedding issues in September of 2022.
Okay.
And then we're coming out in April 2024. I will say that was probably a little bit longer than average for two factors. One was that Zibby is a smaller independent publisher that just publishes one book a year. And then more importantly, because there was room earlier, but it's a wedding book. And so we didn't want a winter launch date. We wanted to sort of time it with the beginning of wedding season. And so
one book a month, right? Not a year, but a month. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, one book a month. And so selling it in September, it was kind of a little too close for like the next year, spring, summer. And I think they already had their lineup. And so we ended up with spring 2024. So I think that's a little bit longer than most people's, but certainly usually about a year, I think is normal. So
yeah, no, it is. I mean, that's what I hear most often. And I think to your point, it is glacially slow. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It just has to be something that we acknowledge. If you're going to go that route, the traditional route, that's part of it.
Oh, absolutely. That's another reason I think, also because of the rejection aspect, but some of the best advice that I got always is just always be working on the next thing, because there are long periods of time where when Wedding Issues is on submission or when we were working on the other books where my main project is out of my hands for the time being. And so you can either sort of sit on your hands, and sometimes it's great to take a break from writing, and that's awesome. But it's also really great to already have your next thing lined up and just kind of working on that.
Well, and the more people I talk to, the more echo that sentiment of when the book is on submission, or when you're in that kind of lull between the book is coming out, but it's not out, or you're going into promo season, to be working on the next thing, just to keep yourself sane.
Yeah.
So you're not thinking about the numbers, and you're not thinking about, well, how's this all going to go? Mm-hmm. So absolutely. How do you coordinate the launch activities with this schedule that is not exactly, I mean, it's not like you can just call in and go, I'm sorry, I can't be in the OR this morning because I just got a phone call. I mean, how do you make that all work?
Yeah, it is. It's difficult. For the book launch, I was able to get one of my vacation weeks that week. And so I'm doing a lot of I'm doing several different events in different cities around the Northeast, and then the weekend in Nashville for the week the book is out. So I'm totally off work. The morning, actually, before I leave, though, the day the book's coming out, I'm actually doing a book signing at the hospital, which is going to be really fun. And like two worlds colliding.
Yes.
But everyone there is like really supportive and really excited for me. So we're going to sort of kick things off there and then sort of travel around a little bit. But I
love that.
Yeah, I think overall, some of the hardest parts is just finding time to connect with people during the workday, because I'm usually out like this, and my schedule can change a little bit month to month. But for example, this month, I'm usually at work at 5 a.m. and I leave between 5:30 and 8 p.m. at night. Okay. And so unless and I feel bad, I don't want to ask people to give up their evenings with their free time. And so it's challenging, but we do have days off randomly, like today. When you're on call the night before, they have to give you the next day off. So I do a lot of stuff for post call. And then even better, my agent lives in London. So I really use that time difference. And so I'll have calls with her at like 4 a.m. my time, which is like, I don't know, 9 or 10 in the morning for her. Oh my God. And it just means that to me that I get up like 20 minutes earlier. And so that's actually really, really helpful, because if she lived in New York or something, we would like never be able to talk live.
So I don't think I've ever talked to anybody whose agent is in another country.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
I heard the agency is based here. I think it's just
okay.
Yeah, it's an American agency. She just happens to live in London and mostly work remotely.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's been a happy coincidence for me. I signed with her in medical school, and I had a little bit more of a flexible schedule then, but it's been amazing this year when I really don't have availability.
So what surprised you the most in a good way or not so good? I mean, it doesn't have to be a air quote bad way, but what has been kind of an interesting, unexpected part of this whole journey for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it all still feels a little surreal. I'm still a couple months out. So like some early readers have gotten arcs and I'm starting to do podcasts and things like that. But I think what feels very surprising is that these characters, this world, this entire story that I just hallucinated in my head is hopefully interesting and entertaining to other people. Like that is still just weird to me.
Yeah.
I read books. I also enjoy reading other people's hallucinations, but it's weird to me that, oh, these characters that feel so intensely private up front are now going to exist in other people's heads. They're going to envision Will and Leighton and Olivia looking different, probably, and sounding different than they sound in my head. So that's been it sounds silly that it would be surprising, but just the experience of it has been surprising.
No, that's it. That's really interesting. And I've not thought of it that way, right? Because will there be an audiobook of this? There's a reason I'm asking.
Thinking, earlier this morning, I was just talking to one of my Zibby editors about we were choosing the voice actress. And that was also very surreal listening to the book read out loud. And part of the weird part is I had the same thing when I wrote plays, but the first time I hear any of my words written aloud, it just sounds wrong because it's just not how my internal voice, my inflection is just different. Yeah. And they're much better. They're much better actresses than me. They're going to do a much better job than me. I don't want to record my book. I would not do it justice. But it's just so different from how it is in your head. So I think that was very surprising as well, but just very cool in a good way to be like, oh my gosh, people are going to listen to this.
Yeah. No, I've never thought about that because all of my books are nonfiction so far. So I've done the audiobooks myself. I've narrated them myself. I would not even consider narrating a novel that I had written myself. And I was talking to my friend Neely Alexander, who's her next book, In a Not So Perfect World, comes out in like a month. And she was talking about the audiobook of her first, Love Buzz. And that was what she said. And that was the first time I had ever heard someone actually say, it's kind of weird because the voice actor did a great job. And that's not how I heard the line in my head when I wrote it.
Yeah, which is a good thing because a whole book of people talking exactly how I talk would be very boring, like tonally to listen to, but it's just how it is in my head.
Right.
So separating from that, understanding that they are, actors and actresses who are performing this piece it's very weird.
So this just came into my head. When you're going from one book to another book, like, are you working on another one now?
Oh yes, I'm working.
Okay. How do you? Yeah, it's ongoing. It's just going to keep going. It's an addiction, a good one. How do you let go of that story and those characters from the previous and then start wholly fresh?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, what's helped is I'm actually interested in writing in sort of two genres, both I would call sort of women's fiction, beach read, commercial fiction, like Wedding Issues is, and then also thrillers, which are just tonally very different, very different. So I've actually sort of alternated. I've now written 5 manuscripts and sort of 1, 3, and 4 manuscripts. 1 and 3 are rom-coms, like Wedding, and 2 and 4 are thrillers. And so I sort of intentionally alternate, and I also rate them. I write the rom-coms in first person, and I write the thrillers in third person, so that I get to keep them very, very separate because they're the thrillers are really dark, and the rom-coms are hopefully really light.
Oh my gosh, this is very cool.
So for me, that's how I sort of, because especially in the beginning, for me, when I write, like I said, kind of garbage, very quick first drafts. So when I'm first writing a scene, the first couple chapters, I don't totally know the characters yet. I don't exactly know how they'll talk. And so a lot of the dialogue I change later because I come back and say this person wouldn't talk like that or they wouldn't think like that. But so especially in that beginning phase when I don't really know the new characters as well yet, I make that very intentional switch in how I'm framing the story, just so I don't bring the last people into the new book. And so the books can sound different with all new characters, not just the same people in a new book.
Exactly. So how long does it typically, and this probably varies, but take you to feel like you're starting to really get to know your characters?
Probably about halfway through.
Really?
For the book, I am like, okay, I know these people really like well enough. And then it's funny because when I go back and start to revise, especially the first third of the book, I go back and I'm like, this is garbage. These people, they all sound the same. Because it's just me saying, like, I'm going to have two people having a conversation about this, but you don't know that this person has this trauma or this accent, mannerisms. And that, of course, informs how they're going to interact. And so there is always so much more revision to be done in that first third from a character perspective, just because at the beginning, a lot of it feels a little bit like placeholder dialogue. And then I come back once I get to know them and I'm like, this is how they would actually communicate this thought.
I think that's something that stops people a lot, myself included, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction or memoir, because you think you should know who they are. Like you'll get to chapter 2 or 3 and think, I can't move forward until I better know who these characters are. But we figure out who they are, or in the case of nonfiction or memoir, we figure out who we are while we're writing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the greatest reasons that we, as writing coaches say, just keep writing, just keep writing. But as an author myself, I understand the hesitancy to do that, the reluctance, because it's like, I need to know them better in order to keep writing. It's almost like you feel as though continuing to write is a waste. So I love to hear that you just keep putting it out there.
I think what helped me was really just embracing the fact that my first drafts, like no other human should ever be subjected to read, because they're just very bad. And once you get rid of that pressure that I need to write, 200 good words, just write 200 words. Everyone's different, but I would say the vast majority of writers that I've talked to, myself definitely included, find it easier to revise than to write from scratch. So once you have something on the page, no matter how ridiculous or bad or whatever boring you think it is, having that to go off of and build off of is going to be so helpful in the future.
Yes. So will your agent then, if does she, is it a she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does she focus on selling? Now you have 1 and 2 and 4. So how do you work together to kind of decide, okay, let's pitch. What do we do here?
Yeah, so I was very upfront. So when I first signed with her with my first book, which was a rom-com like Wedding Issues, I told her then that I wanted to write both and that I hoped to sort of alternate. And we talked about how, it might strategically be better for the first at least 2 books to be the same genre, just so that hopefully you can build a little bit of a readership and people who like Wedding Issues pick up another of my books and get what they are expecting and not something which makes sense to me. And so we've sort of always had that big picture goal in mind of building 2 sort of, I guess, pathways. And I'm still sort of revising the book that I very much hope is going to be my first thriller, which I'm very excited about. But I think I look at a lot of the marketing aspects as just totally separate from my first job. For Wedding Issues, for example, that wasn't the title that I came up with. My title was different, and we changed a bunch of titles. And at first there was a little bit of like an emotional connection to my book. The title, it's so important, But no, the title and the cover are marketing decisions. They're not the story. They really are, which sounds very odd, but it's how I now all of my books, I put these placeholder titles in. I don't really care because I know they're going to change it later on. And so like for when we do sell this thriller, if it makes more sense to publish under a second pen name to keep things totally separate, I'm fine with that. So it just I've always just kind of been upfront with her, and we're managing it just sort of what we think makes the most sense strategically.
It's interesting to hear everyone's different experiences with stuff like that, because many authors are very emotionally tied to their titles and or their covers. They have a vision for it. Specifically the title, I hear more often than not, because it's been in the author's head for, the whole, I've had a title for my novel since before I even started writing it. So I can't even imagine. But I really actually value your perspective of remove your attachment to it because it's a marketing decision. If you don't have control over it, that can be okay if you see it as a marketing decision and not as a personal affront to your ability to title a book.
Yeah, well, I think for anyone who pursues traditional publishing, it's this weird, writing a book is such an intensely personal experience. It's you and your laptop or your notebook, whatever you use for,
your notes app.
Yeah, or your notes app, your iPhone for hours. Like a lot of effort goes into this. And maybe you have critique partners or beta readers, or you have a writing coach, like people who help you along the way, but it's still mostly you. And then you get to the publishing part, and all of a sudden you have developmental editors, you have line editors, you have marketing people, publicity people, you have so many different people who are going to make your book probably a better, certainly more commercial product, but it is morphing it from what you originally wrote. And
Yes.
I think, and so there's, I know people who have chosen the self-publishing route for that reason, because you do retain a lot more of sort of exactly what you set out to put into the world. For me, my goal was always a commercial audience and to get my book into the hands of more people, which I knew I could do with sort of the support of a traditional publisher.
Okay.
But I think you just have to take that sort of emotion of this is my baby, and say, okay, this is my baby that I groomed. You're like a pageant mom. You're like, all right, now you need to go out there and impress the world. I don't know if that's a good comparison. That's how I think about it in my head.
That's funny. Yeah. Right. I mean, at some point you have to turn it over, because that's what you're signing up to do when you go with traditional publishing, is to partner with someone who has been in the space for a long time and certainly doesn't know for sure what will or won't work, but has some insights into what might work better than not.
Exactly.
The last question I always ask people is, and I'm so afraid to ask you because I'm terrified, to even insinuate that you would have time to also be reading, but is, what are you reading right now?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. I love reading. I like to read a lot of my sort of author friends' books. So I just finished several. So right now I'm reading Last Call at the Local by Sarah, who I connected with really early in my querying journey, and who has helped revise some of my pages, has been a great sort of mentor. And before that, I had just finished Julie Chavez's book, the January Zibby release, Everyone But Myself.
Yes.
So
I just had her on yesterday. She's a doll.
She's great. She's great. And then before that, the last non-Zibby book or non-friend book I read is my friend gave me House of Leaves, which is a very weird book.
Okay.
Extremely weird.
I feel like I've heard of it, but now as you can tell by my face, I'm questioning.
I don't want to ruin it.
Okay. Is it a thriller?
No, it's like speculative fiction, I guess. It's very odd. If you want a very odd book experience with a cult following, I guess I would recommend it in that specific context. But otherwise, just pick up a Zibby book because they're all great.
They're all, no, for real. I almost have a Zibby shelf at this point.
I do. I mean, I have one, but yeah.
I almost have one. You have one. It's fine.
I have one.
I'm so intrigued. You said it was called House of Leaves?
House of Leaves. The author,
I'm just really intrigued by your kind of hesitant, not
like a partial endorsement. I don't know. It's bizarre. And I will say you have to get the print edition, because part of the experience of the book is there's another story sort of told in footnotes. And then there's a lot of very interesting sort of text layout choices in the middle of the book.
Oh, that's interesting.
It absolutely has to be held like a physical.
Okay.
It's not a good audiobook. I don't even think there is an audiobook.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know why I've spent so much time talking about this book that I can't even say that I enthusiastically.
Well, like I said, you've just plugged it well. I mean, because now I'm like, I got to see it. I've got to read it. I've got to experience it. Book. Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for taking part of your day when I think you should be sleeping or something.
I slept in the morning.
Okay. I will link everything in the episode notes. And thank you.
No, thank you. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, this is your friendly reminder to follow or subscribe, leave a quick review, and share it with someone you know has a great story or message, but isn't sure what to do next. Also, remember to check out publishaprofitablebook.com for book writing resources and tips, and to see all the ways we can work together to get your book out into the world. Again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk with you again soon.